Good evening. I'm Jake Bramante, in case you guys don't know. Yeah, does somebody want to get the lights back there? So, Dry Tortugas. I've not done, this was my first ever, like, I'm going to go fly in an airplane to go do a birding trip. And so, yeah, so I had, BJ Worth had reached out to me and said, hey, I'm going to Dry Tortugas. Do you want to join me? And I was like, I've heard stories of Dry Tortugas. And I would love to go. So this is it right here. This is just one side of the fort. Yeah, we'll talk. Let's get into it. So first of all, so this is the entrance to the fort. This thing is located out in the pretty far out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, depending upon what you see. But in here we have me. I am on the far left here. This is the crew, and there's BJ right above me. And then we have Roger, Joe, Ray, Robin, and Bill, and then Mikey, who's a character. He's on the bottom there. So out of all these people, there's only two birders, and that is BJ and Jake. Because all the rest of these people are BJ's friends from his previous life. So this is BJ. Since he organized this, he gets a slot at the very beginning. Whenever BJ and I get together, crazy things happen. Including this past summer when he was photographing a great gray owl, which landed on his head, which you have heard about. This is not AI. My wife can vouch for this. She was there as well. But BJ is in his former life, and most of his life was taken up jumping from perfectly good airplanes. And he organized a incredible jump with like the Thai government, his wife, and some other people to have a world record of 400 people all getting together. There are 400 people in this picture, plus some extra cameramen. And just when you start to think about the logistics of this, they had 5 C-130s like going super high up in the air where they needed oxygen. So, I mean, it's an incredible feat. And these people were the one, that's 3 of these people, including BJ, were part of that 400 tandem team. The others were these are like world class. They've all won like top of their game. They're jumpers. They're awesome. So there was a lot of conversations about that and a lot of knowledge about airplanes. Every single airplane that flew over, they were all playing, like, guess the model and the, any sort of modifications the Coast Guard might have made to it and stuff. So that was pretty entertaining. Bill's on the top far right, and he's mainly there because he was helping captain the boat because he's been on this trip a few times. So the Dry Tortugas, once again, the Gulf of America, if you're using Google Earth, is at the very end, 70 miles to the west of the Florida Keys. Why this is important for birders is because the Yucatan Peninsula pops up over here and also Cuba. So like here we have this like kind of hot stopover spot where these birds need to make this big jump. And it's the easiest way for them to make the landmass as opposed to going up through Mexico. So that's the other way to go through it. Dry Tortugas, because of its positioning, is also, and the reason why there's a fort here is because of where it's located relative to the rest of the Caribbean. And so obviously you can see naval commanders would look at this and go, hey, we need to stop piracy back in the 19th century. Looks like a good place, so we should go ahead and set up a fort. So anyway, so here I am at the end of April, leaving the mountains with some rain. And then coming into the flat land of sunshine in Florida. And so I first landed in Orlando and BJ picked me up and he brought me over to Cape Canaveral where his in-laws have a place. And his brother, sister-in-law. And so that's over in Cape Canaveral. You know anything about Cape Canaveral? They sometimes throw some rockets up in the air, some space shuttles and that kind of stuff. But BJ was like, hey, we can bird on the way down. And I was kind of like, okay, cool. Like, I'm thinking in my brain, I'm very focused. I'm just like, let's get to try Dry Tortugas, this other birding stuff. Well, we went out on Peacock Beach that night. There it is. So we went out to Peacock Beach and it was great. There's a bunch of shorebirds out here. Like, we had a sunset walk. It was very nice. And so there's this jetty over here on the far left, and there's a little kind of this canal there where we saw boats coming out. But it's great, like seeing these shorebirds. Of course, this is April, and we don't get to see a lot of this stuff. So just being out there where there's willets there's these least terns, and this guy right here, this is a romantic treat. He was flying around trying to get all these other, like trying to get the attention of these females. It was hilarious. He was just chattering like crazy, and she was like preening and couldn't care less. And finally, he did find a suitable partner who was very interested in this fish. But there was also, I don't know why this thing's not wanting to love me at all. There was sanderlings out there, and there we go. And there was ruddy turnstones. So all these really cool like shorebirds that yeah, we see very few of, if at all. But then this is a bird that I had seen in pictures and videos, and I really was super interested in. And it was like unexpected that they were there for me. These are called black skimmers, and if you notice, their lower mandible is way longer than their upper mandible. And so what they do is they fly over the water, dragging their lower mandible in the water until they find something like a fish, and then they snap it closed. So being able to like see these birds in action was super cool. So like this is like the first day that I'm there. And so this is the jetty that we went all the way over to. And while we were looking back over on the beach there, we go over to this jetty. And we're looking around some stuff, and then we see this. We go over to this little park area, and this is a white ibis, and it's just hanging out. This is just like, a crow would be. There was just a bunch of them. Some kids were chasing them, and I was like, "Oh, this is a cool thing." And they're just like, but I looked across this little canal, and a SpaceX ship comes by, and it's named Steve, which I thought was on brand for SpaceX. If you kind of get that humor, instead of like HMS, to the Smoot or something. Steve floated by, and then but I was looking over. I was like, "Oh, hey BJ, look, they're gonna have a rocket launch tomorrow." And he's like, "Oh no, that's not tomorrow. That's gonna be tonight at like 2:00 in the morning." And I was like, "Oh." He said, "Have you ever seen a rocket launch before?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "You want it?" I'm like, "Okay." So that night, we set our alarms, and we got up and like walked all the way up to this jetty, which took us like 45 minutes or something like that. And BJ and I, being camera people and stuff, we have our cameras, and we're like our binoculars, and we're all ready for this. And then all of a sudden the sky, like, so this is actually like, if you haven't been to SpaceX.com, you can see all of their launches, and they're freaking fantastic. But all of a sudden, like the sky, like it's all glowy, and we don't know where it's going to be. And all of a sudden the sky gets glowy, and then it starts to like go up into the air. And here's my picture that I took of it. And I felt like one of those tourists that is taking pictures of the waterfall and then turns and walks away and doesn't like experience it. So I was like, you're trying to get like my ISO and like exposure and everything. And I'm like, whoa. And then I'm like trying to like fiddle with my camera and stuff. So it was kind of a little bit of a dampened experience. But anyways, there it is. Right. So, but what's also cool about these rockets, this is the Falcon 9, which means it has like 9 little, fire things on the bottom. And I'm not a rocket guy, I'm a bird guy. And so, but when it goes up, and that's the first stage, and then they separate, and the second stage kicks in, and this thing does a flippy, and it flips 180 degrees and slows itself down, and then comes down. And this is like these little guys are adjusting, and it comes and it lands. And so we see it like drop, like all of a sudden it just turns this like bright light, like a welder's torch, and it drops behind this, and it goes, and that was it. And BJ was like, "Oh, that thing blew up." And but it did. That was like part of like how it landed. So it's very cool having seen this on like a computer screen, but actually being there. So yeah, okay, cool. So that was amazing. So like, but now of course we're like sleep deprived. But you have to understand about BJ and I is that we are like alcoholics in a bar. We do not keep each other accountable. When BJ and I are birding together, there's not an adult in the room. And so we were supposed to be working our way down the coast to meet our friends down in Key West. Well, we had just seen a rocket launch, and he was like, "Hey, let's bird on the way down." But we were like, "But maybe we should just bird today, and then we'll just wake up really early the next day, and then we'll head down." So I'm like, "Okay, that sounds like a plan, I guess." So and so we went to Helen and Alan Cruikshank Sanctuary, where they have the Florida scrub jay. So like, cool. I just got a lifer bird of a bird that's endangered, and you can see this one has some jewelry on its leg. And so that was really fun to like be able to see these, wonderful, intelligent, endemic birds to Florida. And there was other birds there, like this mottled duck. He was trying to. There was a mom. She's around, but So that was super cool. And then we went down to Sebastian Inlet State Park. And of course, if you're birding, some are hits and some are misses. The Cruikshank was definitely a hit. The Sebastian, we had a couple, here's a brown pelican flying by, and there were some turns, but it wasn't like hopping for what we were looking for. And then we went down to Pelican Island National Wildlife Refuge. There's a bunch of these. I don't know if these are mangroves or banyans, but we'll just say regardless, it's thick.
They're mangroves.
Thank you. So we are going, Florida girl. But we went around this thing and we started walking. We didn't have any water and it was hot. And we realized, once again, our planning was terrible, but we had a great time. But we did see a couple birds. We saw like a greater yellow legs and like a tricolored heron. And, we're just, we're out birding and we come home and we realized that there's actually another launch that night. So we're like, well, I told BJ, I'm like, well, he's like, are you gonna see that one? And I was like, I might as well. I'm like, but instead of walking to the jetty, I mean, it's not that much closer. So I'm just gonna go out there. But I said, and he's like, well, I might go too. And I'm like, cool. So I said, but the rule is we can't bring our cameras. We can bring binoculars, but not our cameras, so now we knew where it was launching, where it was landing. We had our binoculars and it was super fantastic. The first one was bringing a payload to the space station. This one was bringing, there's a private company that was launching a weather satellite. So that's what this one was. So once again, I encourage you to go to SpaceX and watch a handful of these launches because they are really, really cool. And they have cool commentary and they tell you like the story behind what they're launching and everything. So anyways, but I did cheat and take a cell phone photo of this, but it was just so amazing when they disconnect and when they separate, just how the turbulence, it's super cool. So we got to see some bonus birds here. But yeah, go to spacex.com and you can see launches and you can just look at historical launches. So we watched that one at about 8 o'clock at night. We went to bed. I went to bed. BJ spent most of the night getting all the stuff ready for the next day. So we needed to drive down all the way to the Keys, and we probably should not have stopped. Once again, no adults in the room. But he was like, you got to check out this place. It's Wakatahatchee Wetlands. So this is the Everglades, or really close to the Everglades. So this is just like, awesomeness that you can't go out into really very much. And then this is Florida right over here with this, serpentine business. And Wakatahatchee Wetlands is basically a municipal septic treatment plant that they have converted into an incredible wetland area. So when you go there, like here's the boardwalk and all that light, those are like storks and great egrets. And so and that's not all. Like there's so many cool birds along the way. We haven't even gotten to Dry Tortugas yet. So like there's anemas flying around, here we go. There's a great egret with its chicks, and there's a stork with some chicks. There's another great egret with some chicks, little pterodactyls hanging out. So this is what the storks look like. I'm taking pictures where I'm having to step back because my zoom is too much. Here's a great egret with its lovely feathers. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act, some of that kind of stuff is technically snowies, but still, those feathers went in hats. And so now they stay on birds, and it's great. And there's the little pterodactyl chicks, so lovely. And then this is a tricolored heron with two chicks. These chicks were obnoxious as anything. They're exactly what you'd expect. They sounded just like they looked. And so the patience of the mother, and it fell down like almost into the water, and it was and they crawled back up somehow. It was pretty remarkable. But there was green herons, there was like soft shell turtles. It was super cool, and we took way too long. And we had some friends that were not so happy about all the birds that we saw, which that has happened in my life more than once. But there was like a purple swamp hen, or a gray-headed swamp hen here. Let's see. Thanks, Jess. Purple martin nests. These are all lifers for me. Never seen any of these birds before. I'm just going to point to you. So we finally got our act together, and we headed down the old expressway. This just feels like a child's toy. There we go. So we drove all the Keys, and the Keys, if you've ever been down there, are a bunch of these little islands, and you take one road that goes over, and you just go high and then to the Key, drive through this stereotypical Florida, and then go high over a road to all these different Keys until you get to the last one. And so here we are. We stayed in a very stereotypical Florida motel. I feel like this totally could be a movie. But we got down there. There was some upset people because we had been birding, but we all got over it. And they grumped it a little bit, and then we got over it. And we did feel bad, for the record. The next morning, we all pile into the vehicles. We had to load all the stuff the night before. We all pile into the vehicles. There's just one vehicle, and all of us are in it. And here we are at the marina, and we have two boats. We have Ray's boat, and we have Mikey's boat. If you notice, Mikey's boat is the one with the red fuel tanks all over the place because he had a broken fuel line that he did not get fixed. So instead, he bought a bunch of these red tanks. And being so close to Cuba, they happen to get a lot of Cuban boats that come up to that area. And so the Coast Guard is kind of looking out for that kind of stuff. So Mikey, in his mostly joking way, we were discussing what would happen if the Coast Guard came over to our boat because we looked like we were some kind of runners. And so anyways, we had these two boats over here. There's Mikey with his Team America, and then Joe with his Skydive Arizona, because that's what these guys do. And then we have this other boat, which is a little bit of a nicer boat, and they had these dive tanks because they were planning on spearfishing over at Dry Tortugas. This is one of those good lessons in life. Anytime you go to a national park, make sure you read the regs because there is no spearfishing at Dry Tortugas within quite a big area, so they would have needed to dive deeper than they wanted to. But we got to haul them around, so that was fun. So here we are getting ready to leave the marina and leave the safety of this beautiful calm water. And we're starting to head out. Now, I'm not a boat guy. I prefer dry land. You can ask my wife. We've had some harrowing stuff, but I'm just not a big boat guy. And here we are. We're boating in open water, and it was a lot of this, right? Oh, wait. Yeah, it was a lot of that. It was 4 hours of that, actually. But we took private vessels because we were enabled us to stay there almost an entire week. There's a couple of other ways to get there, but if you do, your stay is much shorter. It also is it was less expensive. We were able to bring things like propane, which you can't normally bring if you are going to stay out there, unless you're bringing private vessels. But we did see like a loggerhead turtle. We saw some flying fish. Mikey at one point was like, "Hey, you're gonna captain the boat," and I'm like, "I'm not captaining the boat." And he's like, "You're captaining the boat right now," and I'm like, "I don't captain boats," and I captained the boat for a little bit. I threw him around a little bit, but hey, that's on them. So after about 3.5 hours, we finally see a little bit of this. This is one of the keys of Dry Tortugas, which I believe is 7 little islands that barely poke up out of the water. This is, and you have to go all the way around it to get on the leeward side so you can be out of the wind and dock successfully. So here we are buzzing around to get to the back of the island. And then on the back of the island, there's less wind that's being blocked by that. So we're speeding around. So this island here in 1825 was a lieutenant commander of the naval, whatever, came over, and they were looking for a place to set up a fort or some kind of outpost to stop piracy coming in the Caribbean. And he came out there from the Navy and said, this place is not good for putting a building out on there, but maybe a lighthouse. And there was a lot of shipwrecks, so they put up a lighthouse like the following year. It was originally called Las Tortugas because the first guy that found it has like 100 turtles around it. Then it was later renamed to Dry Tortugas because there's no fresh water out here whatsoever. And that naval commander was like, partially because there's no fresh water, and also this cannot support a building, let's just put a lighthouse out there. The Army comes along, and the Army Corps of Engineers goes, "This is a perfect place to build a building." And so they're like, it'd be great. Let's go ahead and build, haul out all these bricks. That's a lot of bricks. And we're going to haul all these bricks out and put it on this little key. And so we'll talk more about how awesome that was, what a great decision that was. So this used to be an old dock where they had a coaling dock. So they were just, dock in here, and there was a bunch of coal out there for the Navy. Don't know much more than that. But they're called the coaling docks. A good place to snorkel, although I did get a little wigged out because the water's moving you and you're going through these rusty things. So I kind of abandoned that little perspective there. But right over here, I'm in the middle where all those trees are, and just to the right of it, that is the area where there's camping. And so there's a lot of people that come in and there's individual campsites. We had the option of camping more out in the open, or camping kind of in those trees. We opted for the open per the recommendation because there was a constant breeze coming in. And the temperature the whole time we were there would cool down to 75 and heat up to like 84, 85. So it actually was fairly pleasant, but it was definitely warm the entire time. But we opted just to go ahead and stay out in the breeze. But here we are rolling into the fort. That dock over there, there's a boat there. That green one with the green bottom and the white top is a research vessel. And then that's the Yankee Freedom, which I'll talk about in a second. And there's some sailboats that are moored out over there. We were able to go ahead and kind of moor right on the other side of Yankee Freedom. I will point out this big antenna is a bunch of communications equipment. Border Patrol now has like a very sophisticated camera system that they use up there looking for people that are trying to make their way to America. There we go. So here we are just getting all docked, and I can skip this one. Home sweet home. So over here to the left behind these trees is where the toilet is. And if you can imagine what a pit toilet in 85-degree temperatures is, that's exactly what it was. You held your breath through the whole thing. But over here where those picnic tables are, you can see some people standing there to the right. That's where we ended up. That's where we ended up setting camp there. You can see at the top of the there's BJ. Yeah. At the top of, you can see where the cannon is, and at the very top there's a row of red bricks. That's because they were building this brick wall up using bricks from the South, and there's this little thing called the Civil War that happened. Union claimed the fort or made sure that it was theirs, and so the South obviously was no longer going to supply bricks, so they had to get them from Maine. So they would ship bricks all the way from Maine. That's the red earth apparently from Maine. And they said that only about 30% of the bricks actually were usable by the time they went from being baked up in Maine and then trucking them all the way down to this environment. That's one of those awesome things about this place. Here's what our camp looked like. There's my tent. There's our food tent over there. But once again, that's one of the reasons why we brought boats out there, is because it allowed us to go ahead and bring a lot more stuff we couldn't have brought if you would have come in just on the Yankee Freedom. Which you can go out on the Yankee Freedom, and I think is it 2 nights, BJ?
3 nights.
3 nights. You can stay there for 3 nights if you come on the Yankee Freedom, but you have to bring like charcoal to cook your food or just eat out of a can. And so every single morning, like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, these guys would show up, and then they would be there till like 4 o'clock. And so it would be like this kind of quiet campers in the park, and then all of a sudden just like a lot of people that would show up. The other way to come here is via your personal yacht. You're more than welcome to bring that. Or you can go ahead and come in on an airplane. The Sea Otters, I believe, is what I was told these were. And they fly in. This is the most expensive option other than your yacht. And it's quicker, but you're only there for a handful of hours. But it's another cool way to experience the island. And you can't camp if you come in on a plane. So yeah. So here's what Fort Jefferson is. This is an aerial view that I stole from Wikipedia, and this is a map that I stole from the Yankee Freedom's website to kind of give you a layout of the whole place. The South Poling Dock Ruins is down here at the bottom, and then the North Poling Dock Ruins. So the outside of the fort has a bunch of different birding to be done. Then the inside also has a bunch of birding to be done. And then there's also some snorkeling. So really there's kind of 4 chapters to this in my mind. There's the birds that breed there and kind of live in that area. There's the birds that are migrating through. So that's kind of that's the birding portion. And then there's snorkeling, and then there's the historical aspect of it. So this is what the parade grounds looks like. This picture I took from the top of the wall. These various chunks on top, I believe, are magazine storage areas. This to the right in the foreground is old like barracks. Behind that big wall of greenery back there, all that greenery used to not exist, and that also had like commanders' quarters and that. And now a lot of that they're using that for like employee housing and restoration work and that kind of stuff. Hurricanes just reconfigure this whole area frequently, knocking down a lot of these brick things. They also Bush Key comes off of this, which is this spit right over here on this bottom right. You can see, and there have been times in the past where that's actually an open channel, but then another hurricane comes here and kind of shakes up the snow globe here, and kind of reconfigures things once again. Down over here is where that's where I spend a lot of my time birding. There's these here's what it looks like from the other side. So you can see that storage area where the employee housing stuff is, and then this comes out to a bunch of these trees. These are gum trees right below us, and then there's a bunch of buttonwoods, which is a type of like a dryish mangrove species, and then there's some other ones that we'll talk about as well. So here's what it looks like on the parade grounds from below. And honestly, what I would do is I just spend a lot of time just wandering around to these trees, just looking around to see any sort of movement in there or just something sitting still. I will point out. Well, I'll talk about that later. Okay, so here's what these trees look kind of like bonsais, and they're super fun. And as I started going around this, some of them were familiars. Like here was a gray catbird. Obviously, this is not a resident bird. This is a bird stopping over from Mexico, and it's on its way. But then there was, so many really cool warblers. There were lifers for me because I'm not from the East Coast. So there was like the Cape May warbler, a black and white warbler, which I have seen one of those before. There was an indigo bunting. There's a female black and white warbler or black-throated blue warbler, which was one of my favorites because they're kind of shimmery, and just the contrast was awesome. Of course, magnolia warblers, any of the bright yellow warblers are always fun. We also had a blackpoll warbler, kind of like doing this chickadee impression. And so, as I'm going through, I'm really like working hard, combing through these. I was putting my head along that hedgerow inside, and these are all the ones that are inside of like buttonwoods and stuff. But there was a yellow-billed cuckoo, and they're just so funny because like I saw it and I was watching it for a little bit, and all of a sudden it was like. It just like creeps down the branch like out of view is hilarious. Sometimes they flush, but this is one of those great birds that are so hard to see. But here, like I saw a handful of them, and every time I was giddy. There's the common nighthawk that had just flying perched up there, and every single day like there's different birds. Like some days you'll see like the same bird a few times. But other times it's like, oh, this guy I saw it once and then I didn't see it again. And the blackpoll warbler, like you saw it that day or you didn't see it at all. Here's a summer tanager, and you're getting a little snack. They're all refueling here. And then there's obviously some distant relatives of birds as well hanging out, showing off for the ladies. This little flap that they kept opening and closing. I was looking into the dense shrubbery, and then a tree was looking back at me. And I was like, whoa. So this is a yellow-crowned night heron. So that's another bird that was new to me. Sea grapes, like SEA grapes, is another type of plant that's very common here. And their big leaves come down and they drop a bunch of like good leaf litter in the bottom. But here's a northern parula eyeing the sea grapes, looking for pollinators. And then some of the birds, it did look like they were also eating some of the blossoms as well. Here's a yellow-crowned night heron, but this is an adult. So being able to just like, and of course it's then breeding plumage, so it has those cool feathers on its head. But in that leaf litter, you get some really cool birds like an ovenbird, just like walking real slow, creeping around the leaf litter. And this was actually in the campground. But this is also, so then there's like the cheater. There's like a cheat code in here for those of you know what that means. That basically what happens is there's a fountain. And so there's a water feature that kind of percolates. And so you can like work really hard like I would and crawl around to get like these authentic looking photos. Or there's two benches right here. And you can see there's a photographer hanging out over there. And there was a photographer who put some of these sticks in there. And then all these birds just start popping out and going. So we had like, an American red star. Here's a palm warbler, a couple of Cape May warblers. Sometimes there was multiple species at the same time, like this female red star and a prairie warbler. And sometimes there was just sometimes there's just a bunch of different species of warblers. So we have a palm warbler, northern parula, Cape May warbler, red star, and hooded warbler. Like sometimes it was feast and sometimes it was famine, but you're just sitting there like, and all of a sudden birds would just kind of like start showing up. And so sometimes it's bigger birds like this cattle egret, which they would kind of like, go around the whole like yard and stuff. And then sometimes it was a brown thrasher, which I have seen before, but it's always really fun to see them hanging out over here. But then, so here, once again, there's a magnolia warbler on the little stick. And so there's the blackpoll warbler on the stick. There's a hooded warbler, so beautiful. And then the summer tanager landing right in the middle of the water. Obviously, this does not look as cool as the one that's in there, but there's obviously, anytime you have a bunch of passerines, you're going to have raptors. So there was the kestrel, probably not going to eat some of the bigger ones, but maybe some of the smaller ones. And sharpies were everywhere. There were sharp-shinned hawks flying all over the place. And sometimes I'd be poking my head in one of those hedgerows, and I'd flush one of them. But the other part that's actually really interesting about this place is the hermit crabs, which I believe I read that they are actually closely related to a lobster than a crab, which is kind of fun. But you can see this one found a wing from a raptor, and so it was dragging that around. But the hermit crabs are everywhere, so they hang out in the leaf litter in all these hedgerows at night during the day, and then like around dinner time, they just start coming out, and you have to watch where you're stepping so you don't crush them. And they're everywhere. And it was so fun to just look at all the variety of shells that they had. Because literally at any point they were everywhere. They just were crawling all over the place. And it was super fun just to see. And they were big ones and little ones and whatever. So this is, so I have to bring you to speed on this story right here. So what we have here is a hermit crab on the right who is not in his shell. His shell is being occupied by a bigger hermit crab, and the bigger hermit crab's bigger shell is over here. For some reason, this hermit crab was like, I need to try on your shell because to see if this is a better fit for me. So he kicked out this little guy. And this little guy's like, hey, I'm kind of naked and vulnerable here. So here's this big guy. He's sitting inside of the smaller shell. I don't know what he's thinking. Probably not a lot. But he decides oh, there you go. So that's what a hermit crab looks like.
Ew.
If you ever wonder what a hermit crab looks like. So this little guy's like, hey, my butt's still out. And this other guy is being weird about it. And of course, there's a little guy on the top right. And he's like, I'm having nothing to do with this. He's like a bully. I know. We should have stepped on it. I get it. He is totally being a bully. So this little guy, though, we have a happy ending here. So there you go. But there's a naked. Sorry, I didn't warn you. There's a little bit of a naked hermit crab. So he's like, get away from me. So this is how they get into. This is how a hermit crab gets into a shell. Ready? Just like that. There you go. So yeah, cool stuff happens. So there's we're not hurting. We're also just being in nature, and that stuff is kind of so. So anyway, so then inside of the parade grounds, the other thing that happens when the Yankee parade comes is that they also gather everybody over here and start a tour of the fort. And that's really, it's a cool thing because it helps you learn a lot. So here's the guy talking about this, we're standing right where there's a cannon, like a little apron or whatever. But it's basically a window where the cannon shoots out of it. So he's talking about everything on the floor. So what happens with this place is that their plan was they were going to have 2 rows of cannons, right? So they were going to have a first row, a second row. They designed it amazing. It's really a cool place. And so, but what happened was they didn't. It was too heavy, and the place started sinking once they got the first level. And so, we're going to head on up to the second level here. Okay. So yeah, they have a spiral staircase to get up there. So here's what it looks like on the second level, which looks very, very cool, by the way. The architecture, the way that all the brickwork is fantastic. And of course, you're looking out to the ocean. But because they couldn't put the cannons up there, and they couldn't reinforce the walls for the floors for the cannons, they faked it. So they made it look like they had 2 rows of cannons, but there's only 1 row. And so you can see this thing, these all broke out with hurricanes and everything like that. So that was one of those awesome engineering things that they did. But you can see how they have the little blast windows down there on the first floor, and then the second floor, they ended up just being open. And they use those for prisons and various things for incarcerated people. And then this is a really good view of how that red rock was at the very top. They also had a moat that went all the way around, and they built it so that if somebody was attacking the wall, these little parapets but they can shoot back at people coming up against the wall. And so yeah, There's let's see what else I want to say from this. But then you can finally, so the middle area is just cool to walk through, but and it's literally cooler. But then the top is where things also get interesting. This is where they actually were able to put a handful of cannons on the top. The lighthouse that originally was put there in the middle of the courtyard was taken down, and they put another one up higher here. There's a handful of folly things in addition to the weight of the whole building and sinking. They had created, there's no fresh water there, so they created this water catch system that was going to filter through the sand into cisterns underneath. The problem is that as it filtered through all the sand that they had put in there, it took all the salt out of the sand and made it salt water, and the cisterns also leaked. So I was like, it felt like they kept telling him all these stories of like how dumb these things were. The other thing was that they had their waste management system was everybody's gonna go to the bathroom and it was gonna flow down into this like area, and then the tide was gonna come in and then flush it all out. What? But if you know anything about the equator, there's not a lot of tide. There's not a lot of flushing. So they had a lot of people that were slaves and people that were incarcerated. Get it all out of there. So yeah, they ended up with ultimately, at the end of the day, there was a handful of things that this place ended up serving that was useful. There's also a story of Dr. Mudd, who is the guy involved in the whole Lincoln assassination. But anyway, very cool. There's a lot of things historically about this. But being on top of this, which is really fun, is you have all these birds flying in the sky that are more swords. We have a northern harrier that was flying by. The merlins were flying all over the place. We didn't see a lot of peregrines here because they were out. They were further out on Bush Key. We got to see a broadwing hawk out there. This one is entering its second year. But it was so cool being on top of this because here we have these brown pelicans flying like feet from your face. And then also magnificent frigate birds just gliding on the air. This is a male here. You can see his that red on his throat. This is a female, and then there was also the immatures. So it was really cool just to see all the ages. And here's the kind of a bad picture I have of that sack getting partially inflated. The other part of this island, this is where the breeding part comes in. So here's this beach over here is my North Snorkel Beach, which I'll talk about later. This is another place, the coaling docks, and they store a bunch of stuff over there, and you couldn't go on to that. But all of those buttonwood trees that are right there, that's where a lot of brown noddies were. So that's just like foreshadowing. And then there's this really cool like inlet little bay here, which was really good for like shorebirds. And then like I said, those coaling docks were really cool. But this is Bush Key right here, and this is all roped off. Like you can't go in here, and that's because the big deal with this area right here is the nesting of the sooty terns. And here's a sooty tern. They estimate that there's anywhere between 50 and 100,000 nesting birds. That's a lot of birds in this place. And terns are just, I love terns. I love how they fly. They're just really floaty and fast, and they're awesome. And so here they're ground nesters, and so they were just kind of everywhere. And you could see underneath all these little shrubbery and these trees, you could see all these little chicks, and the parents would go out and go get food and then come back, and they usually had one parent that was hanging out with them. And then you have like a turkey vulture or a falcon or some other bird fly over, and then just all these birds be like, what? And they just like be flying up and circling the sky. I feel like this one's getting scolded. Yes, mom. And then here they're just hot in the middle of the day. This is actually, these two right here are black noddies. At least I know that one's a black noddy. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit darker, and the bill's a little bit thinner. And so we got to see like another rare bird. I've got a better picture of them. But all of the brown noddies, which they said 7,000 to 10,000 of them nest there. So it was very loud, and we were downwind from Bush Key, so it smelled like a little bit of uric acid, a lot. But these birds nested actually in the trees. So you had the birds nesting on the ground, and then you had these ones nesting in the trees, and it was fantastic. This is what it looks like in the morning, like if you get there around sunrise. And so, I mean, these aren't swallows. These are like the goal-sized birds that are just flying around. And this whole thing comes way out and it wraps around to where it's kind of white up there, and you can see some trees in the back where there's a magnificent frigate bird colony out there, or rookery, I guess. So yeah, it was just, they were everywhere, and it was just constant noise, and it was lovely. And so sunrise and sunset were awesome, and you can see high up in the air, you can see some frigate birds soaring as well. And then on the back of Bush Key, there was a couple of rookeries, and you can see there's a couple of inflated sacks, red sacks on those. And then this is one way in the distance. At the very top, if you maybe can see it, this is actually a red-footed booby, and then there's a boat over here in the foreground. So there was definitely a lot of bird guiding that was happening as well. And so some of them had their own boats that they were doing it from, and others were just coming in on the Yankee Freedom and such. But anyway, so there was a couple of fun rare birds there as well. So this is looking back at we can see there's people walking. There's that little walking path over there. This is what a brown noddy on its nest looks like, as opposed to nesting on the ground. But I mean, I'm not far from this bird. They're everywhere. But there's, as you wander around on the beaches, so there's the buttonwood trees, there's like the open grasses, there's the high up, and then there's just wandering along the beaches. This is a picture where we have a sanderling, a couple of turnstones, and then there's a least sandpiper, and then there's a snow crab over there, which they're awesome too. Really cool, like translucent bodies. So just, fun stuff. I don't see that much in Montana, really. We do see these spotted sandpipers all on its breeding plumage, getting ready to head north. Then the sanderling and the turnstones, couple willets. Like, it was just fun to just see who was going to show up that day. And then, we had a couple of semi-palmated clovers here. And then this is a little blue heron, which is a really lovely bird, especially when it's in its breeding plumage, all handsome. So this is hanging out by the moat, and this is a barn swallow that would land on the edge of this. There's all the sooty terns. They look very similar to these. These are bridal terns. Another area. This is by the South Coaling docks. So just, you kind of like always were looking in all these different places. But these are bridal terns, and they have a grayer back and stuff. There's just a few of those. But on the South Coaling docks, which is where we saw when we first came in, there was laughing gulls out there, and then we would have royal terns, and there's a herring gull. So it's just kind of fun. Just, you'd go and you'd see everything, and then you'd go back and you'd see everything again. Of course, the watercolor is amazing. And so these birds are flying over. They have these white bellies that would be kind of turquoise. And then, let's see here. Out on these coaling docks, once again, it was always interesting to go ahead and take a look and see what was hanging out there. And I was more told about this one, and I could definitely see it. You can see these are all brown noddies, except for that one in the middle. You can see its bill is a little bit thinner. It's a little bit smaller, but you can see the bill is definitely thinner than the one above it. So that was a black noddy, so that was kind of fun to have a handful of rare birds there. And another tern that is really wonderful is the roseate terns. Is it roseate terns? Mm-hmm. It's roseate terns. I would say roseate terns because I think I'm cool. But they're a beautiful bird that kind of reminds me of tropic birds with their long tails. It was fun to watch them flying around. There's also a bunch of shenanigans, because anytime there's a gull, there's a shenanigan. And so this is a brown pelican, and this laughing gull, of course, an immature, as you would guess, was sitting on its immature laughing gull was on its back, and he was literally like waiting for this pelican to pull stuff up, and he was just sitting on his back. And BJ actually has a photo of the gull pulling at his cheek.
Oh my God.
To try and steal whatever he was getting. So they harass even the big guys. If you stand on the dock and look down at night, this Goliath grouper comes floating up to the surface. I think this one's probably like 300 or 400 pounds. It's like, I think it was like 6 feet long. It's a gentle giant. It's this huge grouper that would just kind of come to the surface. If you spent any time hanging out by along the water, you'd see random things in the water, like these trumpetfish, which leads me to actually getting into the water. So here is this on the south side of the island. This is kind of a white sand beach where people would go snorkeling. And so this one wasn't as good for me. I think if I would have gone further out into kind of the darker, it would have been better. But I went along this, and it was okay. It was nice. I have some, go ahead and hit it one more time. So there's, this is probably harassing wildlife. I'm sorry. I can't back up very well in the water with my fins. I'm not very good. I'm a birder, not a snorkeler. But anyways, I ended up going around to the other side a few days later. I almost didn't go snorkeling one more time, but I ended up doing it. We'll just watch this for a second here as here we go. Some tangs going on. I'm not going to ID all these guys. There's another. It's a parrotfish. Don't forget. So yeah, we'll go ahead and advance here. So this is on the north side, and I've been told that the snorkeling is better here. So I hopped in the water. I'm going along the wall, and it was really cool getting this like insane school of fish. For me, this was insane. And then there was some barracudas around, which is super fun. There was one, I was trying to get in the water on one of the beaches, and this fish was like in the shallow water, like racing along. And I was like, what's your problem? And I saw that there was a barracuda like not letting it back in or daring it to. But yeah, so it was fun to see those. On this side, the coral was much better. And so because the coral is better, you can see there's way more fish. These are kind of like medium size, 4 or 5 inches. So that was fun. So the snorkeling on the north side was way better for me. It was just a lot of fun. Just to experience it. We had time as well. Yeah. So snorkeling, super fun to go in there. Since we did have boats, another advantage of having our own watercraft was looking out across one of the other keys is called Loggerhead Key, and that's way at the back over there, and that has a really cool lighthouse. So we ahoy, we said we have a motor. So we motored on over there to this really cool island. Of course, because most people that are coming on the Yankee Freedom, they can't get over there, and some people kayaked out there. But yeah, so we pretty much were here all by ourselves. Saw an eastern wood pewee here. And then there was like a gray kingbird, which we hadn't seen on the other island, but there was this orchard oriole. And then flocks, there was some cattle egrets flying over, which is really pretty. And there was some more royal terns. There was a common tern hanging out there. And then there was this also could be known to me as Falcon Island because there were kestrels, there were merlins. Merlins were everywhere. And we did get to see some peregrines as well, which is I was not seeing peregrines. And there were some cool ruins there. And so some of our other folks that were going to scuba dive, they went ahead and they snorkeled out over here, and they found this.
Whoa!
That's a lobster, right? So that's a big. Of course, they were like, it'd be awesome if they could let us take these. It's like, yeah, if they let them take you, then they would do that. That's kind of how that works. So that's Ray catching his big old. But then the storm clouds started brewing. We ended up kind of hunkering down over here instead of hopping over in the water. And so we came back, and we spent a couple more days there. One of the boats took off a little bit early, and we stayed there for a couple more days. And then finally we took off here, saying goodbye to this looking very much forward to like a real shower, as we were a little ripe. And then the problem with going back though is that it's 1 hour longer. And you're going into the wind, so it's a little bit more. There was 5-foot swells, so
Yes.
we're thinking about 5-foot swells. That's like 10 feet. So it was fun. 5 hours of that, but we made it back safely, back to our hotel. Of course, what do you do after you've been spending a week of birding? When you get back to Florida, you go ahead and go birding some more. He's just like, do you want to go birding? And I'm like, I might as well. So we hopped over at Sandsburg Beach at Bahia Honda State Park, added a couple more birds, a common ground dove here. There was some other birds, a short-billed dowitcher. We basically, once again, there wasn't an adult in the room. I barely made my flight. And so that was my trip to Dry Tortugas.